Thank you, Presiding Officer. I want to concentrate my first question today on the announcement this morning that the Grangemouth refinery will shut after 100 years of operation. The decision to close Scotland's only refinery will see 400 jobs lost directly at Grangemouth. This is a devastating blow to the workforce, the Falkirk area and the entire Scottish economy. Supporting the employees at this difficult time must be the priority of both of Scotland's governments. A PwC report published this morning said that the economic contribution of the refinery, supply chain and employee spending was £403.6 million in 2023, and it's estimated to support 2,800 jobs across Scotland. So can I ask the First Minister to outline his government's response to this announcement and say what support the Scottish Government will put in place to support the employees at this difficult time?
First Minister.
President Officer, this is a profoundly serious issue, and my first thoughts at the outset of the handling of this issue is with the workforce who will face great uncertainty as a consequence of the announcement that has been made this morning by Petro Ineos. There has been extensive engagement and dialogue between the Scottish Government and the United Kingdom Government with Petro Ineos about this issue, and both governments have made the case for refining to be continued for as long as it was possible, and certainly not for the announcement to be made today that refining will be ending in Q2 of 2025, because Mr Ross is correct, that will raise significant economic implications for Scotland. It was for this reason that I raised this issue in my first conversation with the Prime Minister on the 5th of July after the election, and there has been good and sustained engagement with the UK Government on this question. This morning, both governments have announced that the approval of the Falkirk and Grangemouth growth deal, which will see the investment of £100 million of investment in the locality, which will provide assistance for the locality to recover from this significant economic shock. There will secondly be immediate career support for workers made available in tailored support to support employees to find employment should they face those issues. And thirdly, there will be investment in the site's long-term future. The Scottish Government and the United Kingdom Government have both jointly funded the Project Willow study, which has identified a short list of credible options to begin the building of a new long-term industry at the refinery site, including low-carbon hydrogen, clean e-fuels and sustainable aviation fuels. And we will put in all effort that we can to support the workforce at this very, very difficult and worrying time. There will be intense dialogue with the trade unions, with the company, with Falkirk Council on these questions, and I give Parliament the assurance that we will update members as the events take their course. But the Government's commitment and our commitment to work collaboratively with the United Kingdom Government is absolute to support the workers of Grangemouth in their time of need.
I think it's absolutely right that this Parliament is united in supporting those workers at this difficult time, and Scottish Conservative members for Central Scotland and indeed our entire group will work with both governments to assist in any way we can. Can I move to another issue that has been dominating many of the conversations we've all been having with constituents in the last few weeks? The winter fuel payment, shamelessly cut by the Labour government at Westminster, was devolved here to the Scottish Government. Here in Scotland, the decision not to pay this money to pensioners is one for the SNP Scottish Government. In announcing their decision to scrap the winter fuel payment, the SNP must have known the impact this is going to have on 900,000 pensioners here in Scotland. Labour said this policy would kill thousands of pensioners across the United Kingdom. And due to our colder climate, a disproportionate number of those are likely to be in Scotland. So does the First Minister accept that his government's decision will lead to unnecessary deaths here in Scotland? And if so, how many?
Minister.
Sir, I deeply regret the fact that the Scottish Government finds itself in the position that we find ourselves in. We fully expected the devolution of the winter fuel payment issue to the Scottish Government, and we're planning to to pay that support to pensioners in Scotland on a universal basis. That was our plan. That's what we were working on. And with 90 minutes' notice, we were abruptly told that our budget would be cut by £160 million because of the decision of the United Kingdom Government. So this is not of our making or planning, and it certainly is not of our choice. But Mr Ross also knows that the Scottish Government, once we have established a budget for the year, we cannot increase the size of that budget unless there are positive consequential funding decisions from the United Kingdom Government. In this case, we have had a negative consequential financial decision which cuts our budget by £160 million. So I very much regret the fact that we will not be able to make these payments on a universal basis, but we have suffered a budget cut from the United Kingdom Government, and the Scottish Government is responding to that accordingly.
Douglas Ross.
It was a straightforward question, so I'll ask it again. Does John Swinney believe...
Let's hear Mr Ross. Thank you.
Does John Swinney believe, as a result of the decision taken by SNP ministers here in Scotland, there will be unnecessary deaths, and if so, how many? He must know. But John Swinney also said, Presiding Officer, it was always the plan to continue to deliver this payment universally. That is not true. The Scottish Government's response to the consultation on the pension age winter heating payment, published in May, long before the Labour Government's announcement, said this: "We will continue to review the eligibility and scope of the pension age winter fuel heating payment moving forward." The SNP were considering cutting that payment back in May.
Let us hear Mr Ross.
It's in black and white in their own document. Now, politics is about choices, and John Swinney's government has chosen to pass on Labour cuts which could see 900,000 Scottish pensioners losing out. The SNP could have mitigated against those cuts. They have a budget of over £50 billion, and just this week we have seen...
Can we have a question, Mr
Just
Ross?
this week we have seen the bloated Scottish Government civil service reach a record high. So can I ask John Swinney, why are public sector pen pushers more important to him than stopping pensioners freezing in their homes?
First Minister.
In his last weeks in office as Conservative leader, Douglas Ross really is plumbing the depths in the questions that he puts to Parliament today. His interpretation of the document, I think, is a vindication of that comment. Douglas Ross knows full well the way in which the finances of the Scottish Government operate. If we suffer a cut in our budget of £160 million, courtesy of the Labour Government, we have got to respond to that, and we have got to act accordingly. Now, I need no lessons from Douglas Ross about mitigating decisions of the United Kingdom Government, because this government is mitigating a series of decisions taken by Douglas Ross and his colleagues on an ongoing basis about the bedroom tax and other measures where we picked up the pieces because of the odious decisions taken by the Conservative Government in London. So I will take no lessons from Douglas Ross on that point. But then Douglas Ross says to me there are choices. Of course there are choices. If we followed the Conservatives on what they have said about tax and spending, I wouldn't be cutting the budget by £160 million. I'd be cutting it by £2 billion, because that's the reality of the Conservative position that they put to Parliament. So I'm going to take no lessons today from Douglas Ross as he desperately clutches for straws in his last weeks in office.
Douglas Ross.
First Minister, standing up for Scotland's pensioners is not clutching at straws. And isn't it telling that John Swinney has now twice been asked how many people in Scotland could die as a result of his policy, and he refuses to answer? It is in black and white that the SNP were considering this in May of this year. They repeatedly call for more powers, but when they're given the chance to act, they run in the opposite direction and blame Westminster. Surely the point of devolution is to make different choices, especially when lives are at risk.
I just find it very difficult to hear, as I'm sure others are too. Let's conduct ourselves in a courteous and respectful manner. Let's hear one another. Mr Ross.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I was saying surely the point of devolution is to make different choices, especially when lives are at risk. You can't oppose Labour cuts at Westminster and simply pass them on at Holyrood, all while pretending they are nothing you can do about it. Scotland is colder than the rest of the UK. Winter fuel payments must be an even greater priority here. The £160 million cost of these payments is just a fraction, 0.3% of the Scottish Government's £50 billion budget. Surely the SNP Government can find the money if it's important to them. So why is keeping pensioners warm this winter not a priority for John Swinney?
First Minister.
Douglas Ross raised the question, Presiding Officer, about the exercise of new powers. So when this government acquired new powers, we took decisions to, for example, ask people in higher earners to contribute more in taxation in Scotland. I think that was the right decision to make, because what that's enabled us to do is to fund the expansion of early learning and childcare, so that families across the country have got the best childcare offering in the whole of the United Kingdom. I'm very proud that our government has put that in place. It's enabled us to spend over £400 million on ensuring that we deliver the Scottish Child Payment, which is contributing to, amongst other measures, keeping 100,000 children out of poverty. Now, there's the exercise of choices that we have made as a government, and I'm very proud of them. But the difficulty we face on the issue about winter fuel payments is that within this financial year, our budget is being cut, at the same time as we are affording pay increases for public sector workers, nurses.
First Minister. I mean, quite frankly, members know that they are not conducting themselves in a courteous and respectful manner. Where there have been previous opportunities to put questions, I would ask members to focus and listen. First Minister.
So, at the same time as we've got a budget cut of £160 million about winter fuel payments, we are affording over £800 million of additional costs to meet the costs of pay bills, so that teachers and nurses and other members of the public services who are delivering vital services in our country. Why are you still shouting at me, Mr Hoy? You've got to listen to the presiding officer. You've got to listen to the presiding officer and stop behaving badly.
First Minister. I can assure the First Minister that I am wholly prepared to chair this meeting. I will not have any members shouting at one another. So let's start to conduct ourselves in an appropriate manner for this Parliament. First Minister.
So, Presiding Officer, within the financial year that we face, where we have an acute cut to our budget of the winter fuel payments, this government has been left with no choice. But what I will say to Douglas Ross is that I will take absolutely no lesson from Douglas Ross, who supported every act of financial vandalism of the last Conservative government, every act of austerity which is leading to suffering amongst pensioners and families in our country, and the Conservatives have got no lessons to teach us.